Everyone in town called it an eyesore, but tonight they'll regret their laughter. Beneath this junkyard lies a secret sealed for 80 years, and when the steel gives way, history will roar back to life. The junkyard sat at the edge of town, rusted scrap piled high, broken engines, twisted steel. To the neighbors, it was nothing but an eyesore, a stain on their perfect streets. They mocked it daily. Passing cars slowed just to sneer. Children whispered rumors. Adults laughed openly. Developers were worse. They saw profit. They saw land. They saw opportunity. And they wanted it gone. Heavy fines arrived in the mail. Legal threats stacked on the desk. Letters filled with promises of lawsuits, promises of demolition. But the owner refused. He stood alone, against ridicule, against pressure, against the weight of public opinion. Buyout offers came next, millions, enough to walk away forever, enough to silence the laughter. But he said no, every time. Why? Why endure humiliation? Why cling to rust and ruin? Because he knew something they didn't. He felt it, deep beneath the scrap, beneath the waste, beneath the ridicule. Something massive waited. The town didn't see it. They couldn't. They only saw decay. They only saw failure. But he saw a secret buried in silence, a secret worth every insult, every fine, every sleepless night. Neighbors shook their heads. Developers scoffed. He's delusional, they said. He's wasting his life. Yet he kept digging, kept searching, kept believing. And that belief was about to change everything. What could possibly be worth this fight? What could hide beneath decades of rust? Why would a man risk everything for a junkyard? The answer was coming, and when it arrived, the laughter would stop. The day arrived. The junkyard was quiet, but the silence carried weight. A truck pulled in, high-end ground-penetrating radar, sleek, modern, out of place among rust and ruin. The neighbors watched from across the street, arms folded, smirks on their faces. Another waste of money, they whispered. The owner ignored them. He had waited years for this moment. The radar team set up. Screens flickered, antennas hummed. The machines swept across the ground. At first, nothing, just static, just noise. Then, a shape. The screen froze, a perfect rectangle, deep, solid, too precise to be scrap. The team leaned closer. Measurements confirmed it. 40 feet wide, 70 feet long, reinforced edges. The owner's heart raced. He had been right. Neighbors scoffed. It's just old concrete, a sewer, a foundation, nothing more. But the radar told a different story. This wasn't random. This was engineered. Excavation began. Shovels clanged against dirt. Layers peeled away. Rust gave way to stone. Then, concrete, thick, heavy, stronger than anything modern. The workers paused. This wasn't ordinary. It was reinforced, 1940s engineering. The junkyard was no accident. It was camouflage, a disguise, a mask for history. The owner stood taller. For the first time, the laughter didn't matter. What lay beneath this slab? Why had it been hidden? And why here, in the middle of a junkyard? The neighbors shifted uneasily. Their smirks faded. Developers whispered. Something was happening, something they hadn't expected. The excavation continued. Dust filled the air. The sound of steel against stone echoed across the yard. Then, a hollow ring, metallic, deep, resonant. The workers froze. The owner's eyes widened. It wasn't just concrete. It was a seal, a barrier, protecting something below. The first metallic echo arrived, and with it, the promise of revelation. You've felt it too, haven't you? When the world mocks your vision, when they call your dream worthless. But deep down, you know something they don't. If you've ever held on when everyone told you to let go, this story is yours. Subscribe now, because these battles aren't just his, they're ours. The machines roared back to life. Dirt flew, concrete cracked. The rectangle grew clearer. The neighbors no longer laughed. They stared, silent. The developers no longer mocked. They watched, nervous. The junkyard was changing. The secret was rising. And soon, the steel would break. 10 feet of dirt, that's what stood between ridicule and revelation. The excavation team worked in silence. Shovels scraped. Machines roared. Every strike against the earth echoed like a drumbeat. Then the outline appeared. A door, not ordinary, not fragile, a pressurized blast door, hidden beneath decades of soil. The workers froze. Neighbors leaned in. Developers whispered. This wasn't scrap. This wasn't junk. This was engineered secrecy. Cutting torches hissed. Sparks flew. The steel glowed red. The air grew heavy. The owner stood nearby. His hands trembled, not from fear, from vindication. For years they mocked him. For years they called him delusional. But tonight, the steel would prove him right. The torches cut deeper. The seal groaned. Pressure hissed. A rush of stale air escaped. Flashlights pierced the darkness. Dust swirled. Silence followed. Then, a shape. A nose cone, gleaming, untouched, emerging from shadows. The team gasped. The neighbors fell silent. The developers' smirks vanished. This wasn't a sewer. This wasn't a foundation. This was history. The vault opened wider. Shadows gave way to wings. Fighter planes, dozens, frozen in time. The soil had preserved them. Oil leaks sealed the metal. Decades vanished in an instant. The owner stepped forward, his eyes locked on the first aircraft. Perfect lines, perfect steel, a relic reborn. How many planes waited inside? Why had they been hidden? And why here, beneath a junkyard? The flashlights swept further. Rows of aircraft stretched into darkness, engines intact, paint unblemished. The workers whispered. "It's impossible," one said. "It's a miracle," another replied. But the truth was clear. This wasn't chance. This was design. Archival records confirmed it later. A black site, wartime storage, hidden, forgotten, preserved by secrecy. The junkyard was no accident. It was camouflage, a disguise, a mask for history. The neighbors who mocked now stared in awe. The developers who threatened now begged for access. The steel seal had broken, and with it, the past had returned. The blast door groaned open. The air was heavy. Dust swirled like ghosts of the past.
Flashlights swept across the cavern. Shadows stretched. Then wings. Rows of aircraft emerged. Fighter planes, sleek, silent, perfectly preserved. The team gasped. Neighbors whispered. Developers stood frozen. This wasn't scrap. This wasn't ruin. This was history. The hangars stretched endlessly. Nose cones gleamed. Propellers shone. Engines intact. Every detail was flawless. Paint unblemished. Steel untouched. Time had failed to claim them. Experts arrived. Historians leaned in. Their voices trembled. "It's impossible," one said. "It's miraculous," another whispered. Analysis began, soil samples taken, oil stains examined. The verdict was clear. The unique soil composition, the slow leaks of oil, together they had created a natural preservative. Decades of decay erased. The aircraft were frozen in time, a fleet untouched by war, untouched by rust, untouched by ridicule. Archival records surfaced, documents buried in government files, the truth unfolded. This site had been a black facility, a wartime storage vault, hidden, classified, forgotten. The owner stood in silence, his eyes traced the wings, his hands brushed the steel. For years they mocked him, for years they called him delusional, but tonight he stood vindicated. Neighbors who laughed now stared in awe, developers who threatened now begged for access. The ridicule was gone, the scorn was silenced. The junkyard was no longer an eyesore, it was a sanctuary, a monument, a heritage site. The restoration began. Mechanics worked tirelessly, engines tested, systems checked. Then the roar. The first engine fired up, steel trembled, dust shook, the sound filled the hangar. Neighbors cheered, historians wept. The owner smiled. The fleet was alive again. How many more secrets lay hidden? How many more vaults waited beneath forgotten soil? And what other stories had the world mocked before they were revealed? The junkyard had transformed from rust to relic, from scorn to sanctuary, from failure to triumph. The junkyard was reborn, no longer rust, no longer ruin. It was heritage, a sanctuary of steel and memory. And maybe that's the lesson. When the world sees junk, you see legacy. Subscribe now, because your vision matters, and together we'll uncover it.